let's move on to Chicago and the Chicago Bears, who this year had an amazing season, all things considered, going from a 4-win team to overtime on the doorstep of playing in the NFC Championship game. This year, I thought the MVP was, without a doubt, Caleb Williams. This year, he had 3,942 passing yards, just 58 away from being Chicago's first 4,000-yard passer in a regular season in NFL, the history of their franchise. He also had 400 rushing yards on the ground. He had 3 rushing touchdowns to pair with that. He also had a receiving touchdown on a trick play this year. And then he was 27 touchdowns, 7 picks in the regular season as a quarterback throwing the football. He led 6 fourth-quarter comebacks and 6 game-winning drives with that. And then in the postseason, he had 609 passing yards. That's 300 per game. He struggled with interceptions and turnovers. He had 5 interceptions in the postseason, but he also had 4 touchdowns and, of course, 2 of the greatest throws, maybe not greatest, craziest throws in NFL playoff history that will be on every compilation of NFL greatest moments for the rest of time. They will just be there without question. 2 of the craziest fourth down conversions you've ever seen, both at home in Chicago. One to eventually end up beating the Green Bay Packers, and then the other to forced overtime in a play where he's forced 25 yards behind his line of scrimmage and just throws a Hail Mary essentially from the 50-yard line off his back foot for a touchdown. The biggest thing I thought he improved this year, which went completely under the radar, was sacks. Last year he led the league with the most sacks in the NFL, was 68. You know how many times he was sacked this year?
41.
He was sacked just 24 times this
Crazy.
year.
That's why Joe Tooney won the Protector of the Year award.
Yes, and then a part of that was the moves that they made at offensive line with bringing in Ben Johnson and then bringing in guys like Joe Tooney. But also part of that was Caleb. He stopped doing some of the insane stuff of scrambling and trying to find the big play. He took a lot more of the easy ones. They ran the football a lot better with Kyle Monangai and DeAndre Swift. But 68 sacks to 24. That's a 44 sack difference.
That's ridiculous.
Is a ridiculous change, and it's kind of been the talking point for Chicago fans of, oh, this is a guy who's going to take his biggest weakness and just fix it every single offseason. The sky's the limit for the kid. So this offseason, it'll be completion percentage, where he was, I think it was 56.7% completion percentage. He was terrible this year. I coined it a Caleb Williams game in terms of where it was literally every game you'd see 20 completions to 40 attempts. The guy never had a normal NFL game this year. He would just have 50% completion percentage essentially every game. The talk is in Chicago is like, oh, he'll fix that, and that'll be the thing he improves this year. That remains to be seen. But I do think it is a valid potential take to have this offseason. Do you have a different MVP?
No, it's got to be him.
Yeah, I don't think it's so much of an argument either. For me, unsung hero, I went with 2 guys, one that is actually an unsung hero and the other is not so much. The not so much one is the new kid on the block, Kyle Monangai, 7th-round pick out of Rutgers. He had 947 yards from scrimmage this year as a 7th-round pick. He had he had one amazing game when DeAndre Swift was hurt, where he ran for over 140 rushing yards. He was very, very good this year, being a spellback for DeAndre Swift, DeAndre had an amazing year himself as an 1,000-yard rusher for Chicago. The actual unsung hero, though, the one that you would not know the name of, have you ever heard of Nashawn Wright?
I don't believe so, no.
Yeah, Bears dealt with defensive back injury issues throughout the year. The names you do know, Jalen Johnson, who's been one of the best corners in the league, and then Commanders legend, although he never played for the Washington Commanders, Tyreek Stevenson. infamous or famed, if you're a Commanders fan, for talking crap to the fans before allowing the Hail Mary touchdown 2 years ago in that Commanders-Bears game. Both of them missed a lot of games this year, and so Chicago is not deep at corner. Nashawn Wright stepped in. He had 5 interceptions, including a pick 6. He had 2 forced fumbles and 3 fumble recoveries, and he made a Pro Bowl, or he made a Pro Bowl, sorry, not as like a return guy, as a true corner, and he was cornerback 3 coming into the season. He is a free agent, so he's going to be a priority potentially to re-sign this year. But for me, that was my unsung hero. Did you have a different unsung hero?
Both those are fine with me. I love Kyle Monangai back from the video game, Cultural 25.
Yeah.
And then I like the right shout out. So
Yeah, I think if there was any other unsung hero, it would be internally and their draft process. They nailed the draft this year with guys like Colston Loveland, who was a slow burner, eventually turned on, and was probably one of the best tight ends in the league the last 6 weeks, including the postseason. Luther Burden, also a slow burner. And then Kyle Monangai. All 3 of those guys were really, really good and looked to be offensive pieces for them. So if there is another unsung hero, it would be just the Bears staff and draft prep. They really killed it this year.
Sure.
For this offseason, as they move on and try to build on what was an overachieving year, the Bears lost Eric Bieniemy, who was their running back coach. Bieniemy returns to the Kansas City Chiefs. They also lost Declan Doyle, who was their offensive coordinator. Now, Ben Johnson calls plays for Chicago, so it's not like they're losing the guy that calls plays. Declan Doyle was just a guy that was in meetings for prepping for the team and was one of the lead voices. That's what offensive coordinators do when the head coach calls plays. He joins the Ravens to become their offensive coordinator and join Jesse Minter's staff, and he's expected to call plays for them. So he'll be calling Lamar Jackson's plays this year, coming from Chicago with Ben Johnson. They promoted their passing game coordinator, Press Taylor, to offensive coordinator. And those are really the 2 big changes in-house. For the draft, the Bears had the 25th pick in the draft. They went heavy, and I mean heavy, offensively. Last year, of course, the three gamers, that's a great descriptor for all 3 of them in Colston Love and Luther Burden and Kyle Monangai. But they also drafted Ozzie Trapilo, who started a lot of games for them at on the offensive line in the 2nd round as well. I think this year, it's very obvious. They need to go heavy defense, flip that on its head, go offense last year and defense this year. They're going to need edge rusher. They need to pair someone with Montez Sweat, who had 10 sacks this year. They're also going to need a safety to replace a back end that is like nearly guaranteed to be losing at least 50% of it, if not both, of their safeties this offseason. And then my last need, what I think would be personally interior linebacker. This is a team that's in win now mode. So edge rusher is, if Akeem Mesidor fell that far for whatever reason, which he gets mentioned in every team's draft, it feels like if he fell that far, I think they would jump on him. Otherwise, I do think they should just go best defender available, because I do think there's going to be a lot of options for them there. You're going to talk about guys like T.J. Parker, C.J. Allen out of Georgia. I could see them picking Anthony Hill that high. If they're that high on Anthony Hill, horns down, of course, because I don't expect him to be there in the 2nd round. They don't pick until the 7th to last pick of the 2nd round. Yeah. 55, I think, is what it is. Or no, it'd be 57. So if they really loved Anthony Hill, they could go for him. A lot of the great edge rushers are going to be gone, and so maybe it's a guy who fell for a reason that occurred in the combine.
Character
interviews,
issues cropped up.
Character issues.
You may not want to take the guy with character issues after what happened last year.
That was James Pierce last year, who of course is dealing with what he's dealing with now. But he had a great season for the Atlanta Falcons. That'll be remembered forever. Sadly, if someone fell for one of those reasons of something popped up in the combine or popped up in interviews or something, then maybe that is the move there. Any disagreements there? I do think there's a case for everything damn team in the NFL because it's so fun and drafting a wide receiver.
Yeah.
And if like a first round guy fell that far,
Sure. I agree with just kind of best available defensively, and then that immediately makes me really intrigued to see what their board looks like, which sadly I'll never get to see. But like when we get to that spot and they're about to pick, and we're going to be doing our live draft show coverage, and we're trying to think, who they're going to take, who they're going to take. Maybe someone does fall in their lap and it's really obvious, or maybe it is just kind of the cluster you just talked about, and it's like, okay, are they, who's their guy out of this group? But it makes perfect sense. You hit the home run last year with legitimately you got top 2 tight end in the draft.
Yeah.
What's looking like a top 3, top 5 running back. It was a really good running back class, so time will tell. In the 7th round, and then you got one of the best wide receivers in the draft as well. So you're almost kind of set in a lot of ways there. So pivot to the defense, beef it up. Completely agree.
For cap space contract decisions, the Bears are negative $5 million in the cap space department. They do have a ton of restructuring possibilities. They could free up as much as $73 million in cap space. That's $73 million, meaning they could free up $78 million. And they have a lot of high-end free agents, so they're going to have to make a ton of decisions, not only with the guys they have already under contract, so restructuring, but also some of the free agents they're losing. And Kevin Byard, the 33-year-old former Titan, is coming off a season where he made the Pro Bowl. He had 7 picks, and he played 99.8% of their defensive snaps. But he's 33, and so maybe you could move on from him. He was just a Pro Bowler. With him being 33, that kind of cheapens him and keeps him on a 1-year, maybe 2-year deal. Jaquan Brisker is the other safety who is also a free agent. He played a fine season statistically. He was more of a guy that popped and a leader as a part of that defense. He did not have an elite year statistically. Won't pop off the page if you're box score watching, but he played 99.9% of the snaps for Chicago. So these two safeties played essentially the entire defensive season for Chicago. They're both free agents. Jaquan Brisker's 27. He's got a big market for teams that are going to want him, and he's going to demand probably $20 million, give or take, if not more. Something that's kind of been teased by Bears, media and Bears fans, specifically though Bears writers, which this and then some of the stuff with Green Bay shocked me that this was even like being talked about, because I follow a bunch of the New Orleans beat writers and whatnot, of course, as a New Orleans Saints fan. But they don't talk like the way that these two franchises have at least talked about their offseason going forward. And that's the Bears are testing a potential. They think they should test a DJ Moore trade. DJ Moore signed for the next 4 years. So, like, it's him trading him is not a rental deal. It's not a 1 year he'll become a free agent. No, he's under, he's under contract for 4 years. He's getting paid $29 million next year. That's the 13th highest paid receiver in the league. This year he had just 682 receiving yards, which was the 40th best in the league. He had a really up and down year. I mean, DJ Moore fantasy owners would know that. He'd be probably like Kenneth Walker 2.0, not in terms of he had plays that were stolen from him, but it was why'd you pop when it felt like it didn't matter towards the end of the season when I drafted you so high. I wonder how that would work out. I mean, they obviously have the weapons maybe in-house already with Luther Burton and Rome Odunze and what's his name? Ja'Day Walker.
Yeah,
of Texas
all day
A&M,
Ja'Day.
Who had a fine year, has some very bright moments for Chicago. But what is the market for DJ Moore and $29 million a year, which a lot of that for this year, if you don't know, NFL contracts, when you trade NFL contracts, the team that is trading their player to another team has to pay all of the signing bonus that they give to a player.
Yeah.
So that makes like contracts like Jordan Love essentially like untradeable, because over 75% of his contract is fully guaranteed signing bonus money that you're going to have to pay. DJ Moore is not necessarily that. He could free up nearly $20 million in cap space if they were to trade him just this year. So they're not going to eat a ton of signing bonus. They will have to eat signing bonus over a few years. But I don't know what the market's going to be there for DJ Moore. This is a guy that they already traded for in a trade that eventually landed them Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
But with the way he had the season he had, I don't hate it necessarily. I was just kind of surprised to see it. It wasn't something I necessarily considered.
It's so interesting because I get the thought behind trading him, but every other team also knows why you're trying to trade him.
Yeah.
And that's because it doesn't really seem like he's going to be worth the contract. So then it's like you're not really probably getting much back for him. You're really just trading him to free up that cap space, like you said.
In terms of free agency and actually signing players, I do think with the cap limbo that they can do, which I expect them to do a fair amount of it, not to the level that the New Orleans Saints do. And it won't be, they don't have to do it to the level that teams like Kansas City or Minnesota will have to do, where they're 30+ million over the cap. They're just $5 million over. So I do think they will make some of those moves to free up some cap. And I do think they should lean on themselves and bring back the guys that were part of a very productive season for them in Kevin Byard, in the unsung hero Nashawn Wright, who is a Pro Bowler. I do think Devin Duvernay had a very good year for them as a returner. He did not end up returning a touchdown this year, but he was productive for them. He sparked a few of their wins, one of them most notably a win at Minnesota, where he returns a huge kick return with less than a minute remaining in that game, and it leads to a field goal for Chicago. I think bringing someone like him back makes a ton of sense. I also think some kind of veteran receiver on a cheap deal, if you are to trade DJ Moore, makes a ton of sense. And I'm thinking guys like pipe dreams, really, Keenan Allen or Mike Evans. Keenan Allen has already played in Chicago. Mike Evans obviously has been a Buck his entire career. When you think of Rome Odunze and Luther Burden, those are more playmakers. Luther Burden, of course, is speed threat over the top. But you have a guy like Rome Odunze who's a playmaker. You add Mike Evans, he can be a physical threat for you down in the end zone, which can pair with Cole Kmet and Colson Loveland as those physical threats. He also plays well in once you get to cold weather, because once you get to cold weather, speed doesn't necessarily take over as much.
Sure.
It becomes a lot more physicality. And, Mike, of course, has played in Tampa Bay for many, many years, so he wouldn't be used to Chicago cold, but his body's ready for that kind of environment and those kinds of games. But those are pipe dreams, and those are really only if they were to trade DJ Moore that those make sense. There are 3 free agents, and I'm curious to know if you know the connection for them. Tim Patrick, Josh Reynolds, and Khalif Raymond. All free agent wide receivers. Why do you think I bring up those 3 names?
Well, I know Tim Patrick and Josh Reynolds, I know for sure both played for the Lions at one point. I don't even remember the third guy you said.
Khalif
Raymond.
Also,
is he also a Lion?
All 3 of them played for the Lions, and all 3 played with Ben Johnson.
Gig 'em for Josh Reynolds, by the way.
Absolutely. I do think as former Ben Johnson receivers, it makes a ton of sense to potentially bring in those guys if they trade DJ Moore, but even if they don't, to kind of hit the ground running for them.
I mean, none of those guys are going to be all that expensive.
No, not at all. Tim Patrick probably had the best year of anyone playing with the Jaguars. But Josh Reynolds and Khalif Raymond are also both guys that played for Ben Johnson. I do think those are kind of maybe some potential wide receiver free agents for them if they're to attack offense in any way. But I do think the main part of free agency should be bringing back the guys that are free agents in Kevin Byard, Nashawn Wright, Devin Duvernay. Bringing those guys back and being able to build on that core, I think, is the key to free agency. Any names pop off the page for you?
No, I like bringing back the guys, personally.
Yeah. For early realistic goal next year, I do think it is to make the postseason and not to win the division, because the damn division is so damn difficult, redundant. with how electric Caleb and Chicago were last year, and obviously, we talked about it a ton, is they can't rely on fourth quarter comebacks as much. I don't think anyone expects them to do so. With how electric they were, how competitive their division will be, and how competitive they were in their own division, I do think they should strive, and the goal is postseason or bust. Not the lofty expectations that a lot of people are going to put on them because they were a drive away, a score away from being in the NFC Championship game, playing in overtime against the Rams. I do think it's to make the postseason. Because if you have a guy like Caleb and he's that damn good and he's that electric, to bring up a guy 2 years ago, Jaden Daniels, your guy.
Yep.
He didn't win the division. No, he went on the road. He beat Tampa Bay. He went on the road, and he beat the Detroit Lions, the number one overall seed. And sadly, they were not up to the task for the Philadelphia Eagles, but you give him a chance to go on some kind of run like that. And this same goes for Caleb, who his 2 games were at home, but it was an electric 2 games that they were right there for. Make the postseason, I think, is the goal for next year. Has to be. I feel like it's postseason or bust. You can't let this become, one, something that drastically turns around, speaking of the Commanders.
Sadly, yes.
2, something that is like, oh, man, we just missed it. We just missed it. Think of Joe Burrow and the Bengals. They made the Super Bowl, of course, in year 2 with Joe Burrow, but he hasn't been back to the postseason since he lost in the AFC Championship game to Mahomes. That can't happen with Chicago, not with the way the NFC is built, at least. So I think you got to prioritize making the postseason at all costs to give Caleb another chance to prove if he really is Iceman, as he has been coined this year.
Yeah, I mean it's a safe expectation or goal, but I do like it for all the reasons you said, especially the keeping of momentum within the clubhouse and within the organization. Don't pull Commanders where a year ago today I was much more excited about the direction, and now I'm scared and I don't know what's gonna happen next. Or even talking about the Bengals. So yeah, just make the playoffs, keep the momentum going. Caleb's still really young. A lot of those offensive weapons and pieces are still really young. Ben Johnson's still really young. Just keep the momentum going.